sharing the screen?
No, I'll just introduce you, then you can. Okay, so yeah, we are live now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very unique webinar on evolution of endpoint security to protect against cybersecurity threats. We have with us our expert panelist, Mr. Kanishka Srivastava, who is the Principal Program Manager at Microsoft. Mr. Srivastava would be discussing about the latest trends, developments, and career prospects in endpoint security. So, Mr. Srivastava, I invite you to stage and request you to please take forward the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Vikas. So, folks, let me share my screen so that I can bring up my presentation. Vikas, hope this is visible.
Yes, Kanish, you can see it perfectly.
Okay, great. So, good afternoon, everyone. And as Vikas said, I'm Kanishka. I'm a Principal PM Manager at Microsoft. I work in the security and compliance side of the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the session. But in today's session, what we'll do is talk about evolution of endpoint security and how it's being used to protect against the cybersecurity threats. Particularly, we'll start with talking about like the big bad world and what is the threat landscape there. Then we'll talk about the defense, which is like how we are trying to protect against the cybersecurity attacks. And then we'll give you a glimpse into like some ways by which a career path into cybersecurity could be carved by just talking about a couple of examples. That in itself can actually be a whole session, and probably if required, we can do that separately later. So with that, let me actually get into the first section, which is just talking about how our threat landscape is evolving and basically what are we seeing in the world today. So the primary thing that we need to understand is that the digital real estate is growing. Not just growing, it's exploding. Some time back, the only digital touch points were the computers in the organizations. Then it expanded to some things in your home, like mostly your PCs and phones. Now it's actually everywhere, right from the shop where you would like purchase things to various sensors that have percolated your home to your commute, in organizations, in their entire supply chain, in interactions with organizations and governments. So that digital real estate is actually something that that's really exploded. And with that exploded digital real estate, the key thing to understand is that it is actually a real battlefield. And when I say battlefield, like I am not exaggerating things. So if you would look at how, for example, some of the news items that are already like there in the last couple of months, you could see that it's actually like state against state. So earlier it was more about like to view this space, you would actually imagine that there are some hackers sitting in their basements, probably teenagers who are trying to do this, whereas now it's become almost an industry, sometimes even backed by countries. The other point to note is that protection against this is something that is required everywhere, right from individuals to organizations to nation states. And that's something that's in the skills for that are in short supply, because no one had really expected this to grow so fast. And finally, like what's causing all this is just the fact that right now everything can be attacked, and that's something that we covered in the previous slide as well, that right from your IoT devices that are in your home to like nuclear reactors, everything can be under threat. Now, this is just trying to give you a quick glimpse into how the attacks have evolved, the frequency, and let me actually play that back again to show that you would see that the frequency of dots here increases, which just talks about how breaches have increased over time. And the second thing that you'll note is just the fact that the dots are becoming bigger. So that just tells you that now it's one attack after another, and which probably you could say the last major one was the Solarigate or the Solar Winds one, where like it was actually like presidents of like top countries actually talking about what should be done or should not be done. Uh, in fact, that is one point that I want to emphasize, which is like it's now actually become like such an important thing that every big country is actually a key player in this. The names that you see more often are US, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. But others are also like playing this as a game where someone would attack, the other side would want to defend and have a counter-attacking strategy there as well. A good example there in the recent past was actually a Saudi refinery, a Saudi giant in the oil field called Aramco. Incidentally, this was supposed to be like the biggest IPO ever. And on the Aramco side, basically, a huge number of their desktops were like flattened by a mass attack. It was alleged that it was one of the neighboring states that had attacked it. And when they dug deeper, they figured out that it wasn't a one-time thing. They did this in 2012, 2016, 2017, and not just attacked the oil giant, but also bunch of its partners who were actually working with them. So it was almost a concerted attack against this. You might have also heard the news item around similar attacks on the Iranian side and people making claims and counterclaims about like attacks on their nuclear program. So that just gives you a glimpse of it's not just about your PC and my PC or even at the organization level. It's a game of states now. Now that was just a brief glimpse into what this space was looking like. Now let me actually talk about how what are we building to protect some of these things. Now the key thing to understand here is that the protection against cybersecurity threats is multi-layered, and although this is just one of the sessions, over some subsequent things that Vikas and his team will help organize, we will go into different aspects of protection in this space. Today, what we'll be focusing on are the endpoints. So you could protect against these attacks by protecting all your endpoints, like your PC, your Mac, your mobile devices. The other elements that could and in most cases do play an important role is protection against the key sources. For example, you are protecting in your email itself, because that's a key source of attack, like malware or attacks coming in. Or for that matter, you could try and protect things at the network layer, or even like go very, very specific and go after different types of attacks there. So in this part of the session, we'll go into endpoint security and how that part of protection or the shield against attacks has evolved over time. And I will use Microsoft's example around what is our offering and how we've evolved it over time and how that helps protect against some of these cybersecurity threats. So the product that Microsoft has for this is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Right now, that's available for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, and iOS. And I'll talk about the journey that has taken place there. So this is a fairly complicated piece of how we view uh, uh, our protection story on Endpoint. So I'll take different elements of it and talk about how they've evolved. Uh, and I'll start with the next gen protection, where the most simplistic way to look at it is that this is like your advanced AV. So in like olden days, it was about the protection was primarily AV was considered as the main protection. We like you might have heard about McAfee's and semantics of the world starting some of these things, and then Windows Defender became a big name here. And in the beginning, it was about static signatures, focusing on a file that can be malicious. But over time, what this has evolved into is something that's very, very heuristics, ML based, that actually tries to protect on the device as well as on the cloud against attacks that are very, very prevalent. I'll just take one example of this evolution, where this is the example of a ransomware attack, which is again something that we've seen a great uptick over the last few years, where what an attacker would normally do is they would first be very, very targeted. They'll go after the enterprise that they know can pay. That's the ransom that they want from this enterprise. And what they would try to do here is they would go after what is weak and vulnerable in their system. It could be their infra, it could be that on the user side, it could be on the file side. And from there, they'll come into the system, wait for an opportune date where they know that it's important for that organization, and then essentially go ahead and encrypt everything. And that is where like they have the control, and they would ask for ransom, and things would remain locked till the company pays the ransom. And how we would essentially protect that is, for example, in our Microsoft Defender for Endpoint offering, we would call out what are the associated human-operated ransomware attacks that are there, talk about how that attack has progressed through different machines, like different users, what has been the exact graph of that attack, and also give out what are the summaries, what are the devices that are still at risk, and also the associated mitigations for that. And that can help an organization protect it. So that was how AV evolved. But after along with evolution of AV, the other aspect was just the fact that essentially all the security providers understood that you also could make things better by reducing the attack surface. And that is where basically things like, let's say, blocking traffic to a site that has low reputation, or allowing only trusted applications to run. Or let's say if an organization is concerned about, say, phishing attack, which is actually quite common. So then an organization can actually go ahead and say that I want to block, let's say, all the gambling sites because that's a key source of a phishing attack. And they can say that that's something that I want to protect against. Or let's say Office macros could be a source of this attack. So the machines that do not need to run these kind of macros can actually be prevented from running this. So that's the approach of reducing the attack surface so that the attackers don't get an entry into the system itself. Then there was the threat and vulnerability management, which was another piece that came in, which is essentially about the fact that what we are trying to do here is know more about your system and what are the vulnerabilities in it, and prioritize the threats that are associated with it. So to give you an example, let's say your machine has an older OS or doesn't have the latest patch. Or, for example, your mobile device has an app that has known vulnerabilities, like, say, the WhatsApp vulnerability that was found some time back, or the cam scanner one. So what we would do is alert against that, so that and give a view into like what are the different devices that have these kind of vulnerabilities available, and that's something that can be then protected against. So that is the threat and vulnerability management space. Now, the three elements that we talked about on the left. So that is how, that was on the prevention side. So the aim was to protect the endpoint itself, so that the attack does not happen at all. And that was the way industry believed that we could prevent the machines from all sorts of attacks. Over time, we realized that no matter what we do, some attacks will seep through. It could be something that's totally new that we haven't heard of, or something that there is an incorrect configuration. There could be n number of reasons why something will seep through, but things could always. And that was the reason why there, we had a pre-breach set of things that we just talked about. But now, an important offering was post-breach. What happens if the breach does happen? So the key thing there is to ensure that we are providing all the right information about that breach. That okay, the breach is there, but which are the machines that are that have been breached? What are the alerts associated with it? In fact, instead of 10 different alerts, is there a single attack incident that is there, and can an organization get to know that, or for that matter, a country get to know that these are the concerted attacks that can be linked together? Then, given their own security operations a view into advanced hunting, where they're actually going and looking at different types of signals to determine that, okay, what may have happened, or some things that may normally not be cached, using different types of behaviors or actions, that what could be the clues that can tell us that that something is under attack. So that was the entire aim of post-breach work, where we are sending a lot of signals to the organization, correlating which or using which an organization can try and determine that which pieces are under attack, and then they can do the right things to remediate them. So this was a logical step, and we started sending a lot of signals. But then the next problem was, it became too many signals. So a good thing, so I'll talk about what is auto IR, but an interesting thing here is, when we did a survey of organizations, that how much time their security teams are spending on different types of alerts, we figured out that they're spending like a huge majority of their time on the things that can be automated, and very little time on the things that are actually special and need real human intervention. So that is where, like, we said, okay, let us automatically remediate these threats. And what we were trying to do there was try to mimic what a human would do. So try to determine what is the threat that is there, perform the necessary actions, and then in certain cases where deeper investigations is required, that's what we would flag. And that is how we try to ensure that before a breach, we are doing all the right things. If a breach happens, we are sending all the signals. And of those signals, whatever can be automated is something that we would try to take care of. Now, once this was done, then the next ask that organizations had was, we alluded to this fact that there's still a big dearth of having the right talent to do all this, because you would still need expertise in the security area, which is not very, very common. In addition, not every organization will spend a lot of time and resources into like developing a very big or strong security arm. So because that's not their core competence. HLL will market its stuff. McKinsey will do consulting. Your L&T will do construction work. They are not into security. So how do they have best benefits of it? They definitely have their own security arms, which will try to do the right things. But what if they need more help? And that is where Microsoft threat experts came in. So a good way to look at that is like they're threat hunters who have the organization's back. So there, what can be done is, if an organization has any question about a particular alert or malware, or they want to just consult folks, that's something that we provide. Plus, we also look at what's specific to your organization or your industry, and what are the threats that are associated with it, and provide that information so that organization can take the best actions associated with all this. And that is what builds our complete story of like how on an endpoint we are trying to protect. So just to summarize, there's a pre-breach part where we are trying to ensure that we have the right modern AV, reduce attack surface, and think about the vulnerabilities of the system, so that we can ensure that the attack is prevented as much as possible. And just in case something still goes through, that is where our EDR piece comes in, that detects what is coming in and passes all the signals. Then comes the automation piece that takes care of most of these signals automatically. And finally, the threat experts who would actually help the organizations just in case they need extra support for this. So that is our endpoint story in a nutshell. And that story is doing quite well. This is just one of the testimonials, which is like Gartner's Magic Quadrant, which is one of the standard ways by which industry tries to understand like what are the good systems, and Microsoft's like in the leader quadrant there. So that is considered like really, really good in the space. So with that, let me actually give you a brief glimpse also into how can some of the career paths into cybersecurity be charted, and what I do. And there are naturally a number of ways something like this could be done. So what I've done here is just pick 3 examples of different people who man our security leadership, and just show you how they have evolved, what they've done to grow into those positions, so that you get an idea what are the different paths there. So the first one here is Raghav. So he's our principal security group manager. So essentially, he's the lead security researcher. He leads that entire team of security researchers, where his responsibilities are like in Microsoft India, all the protection and prevention related work that's there on the security side, plus the work on the compliance side is something that he takes care of. Very interestingly, he just has a diploma in computer science, no degree after that. It says that he has been in the industry for a lot of time. He has huge experience. He's moved from a research associate to being research manager to being director, from small companies to bigger companies, and just the wealth of experience that he's gained through that career in working through these different companies has helped him become actually our top leader in this space. And like I also have just a couple of quotes from him, things that actually helped him get to this stage in his career. So his passion for protecting against like the bad actors, that is there. That's one. And the second thing is this space is so interesting. It evolves every day. It is almost like a game of cat and mouse. He is the defender. There are attackers out there, some known, some unknown, and he loves the fact that he's playing that defender's role to the fullest. So that's our security researcher. Then there are data science people in our team, because like this space is all about data. If we have more signals, then we can analyze those signals and figure out where the anomalies are, and that plays a very big role in understanding what's anomalous, what's malicious, and that's something that we can flag. So here we are talking about Funny, who's our lead data scientist. So his responsibilities include the fact that like on Windows PCs as well as other endpoints, basically he tries to protect us against the phishing attacks, which essentially are, interestingly, are one of the biggest and most growing threats that are out there. And very interestingly, he is not a comp science graduate. He's done his electrical engineering. He done a bunch of online courses to understand and get deeper into the online space. He's spent a little less than 9 years in the industry, working through from Oracle to startups like housing.com to Reliance, and again, everywhere working through data. And now he's our lead data scientist here. And then again, for him, in fact, this is one thing that you will see across the board, just the fact that the industry is very, very dynamic. That is something that works for him and gets him motivated. And the fact that he loves data, and this is the place where we are getting probably the maximum number of signals to work with. So that is something that drives him into the space. Now I'll talk about Suraj, who's our on the research PM side. By PM we mean program manager, so it's a research program manager side. And right now he works towards incident response. He leads the threat intel and response and operations team here. And he has, again, not a comp science degree, but bachelor's in electronics and communication and certifications on the security side. And then he has spent a lot of time within Microsoft working through different types of roles and developing different expertise. And again, his passion, where he holds a ethical hacker title and some of those things, is a testament of how interested he is in this space. So I'll now pause and because my presentation's done, and wait for any questions that may be there.
Thank you, Kanishka, for that really interesting presentation and introduction to your team. As I can see, we have a question from Saeed Afzal about how has threat delivery evolved over the years? What's different in 2021, which was not there 5 years ago?
Sorry, Vikas, could you please repeat the question?
So it's actually in the questions tab, right on the right side.
Oh, okay.
So how has threat delivery evolved? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So very interesting question, Sayed. So threat delivery. So the evolution here is actually very interesting. So when we look at how like threats would reach an endpoint, let's say 5 or 8 years back, the approach was fairly crude. So attacks would mostly be brute force. That has changed into something that's very targeted. Again, earlier attackers were looking at just something that was very vulnerable in your system, whereas now it has actually evolved into something that will make use of every information that's out there. So social engineering is, for example, a very common way of doing it. A lot of these attacks are actually targeted by the information that folks may have already left outside in the virtual world for everyone to see, and that's actually used to gain information, make it more interesting for you, so that you click on that link or you go to that site or you open that file, and that could be a great entry vector into your system. A very good example here is we had COVID. So attackers won't leave an opportunity, even if it's like something as severe as this. So we have seen a bunch of COVID-related attacks where users would be lured into clicking somewhere that some app that could just be acting as something that's helping you track things around COVID and all, and that could actually be used to snoop onto your device and take control of it.
So, Kanish, we have another question um, from a faculty at Christ University. The question is has the pandemic increased the necessity of endpoint security?
I think that's again a great and a very timely question. So it has not only increased the necessity, it's also changed the way we look at endpoint security, how we provide it, and how organizations are making use of it. I'll give you some examples. So earlier, uh, uh, organizations would believe that if their perimeter is secure, a lot of them would say that I will keep all my data like locked in, which meant that like you come into the organization's ecosystem, nothing will go out. It is their desktops, even if they're laptops, they would be there, but that's it. Now, because of pandemic, organizations still have to work, educational institutions still have to work. So what they had to do was they had to ensure that now connectivity can happen even from outside. Their data also had to move to cloud anyway. A lot of that had was moving towards cloud, but naturally once it's out there, you need right security practices. So what we had to ensure was that these we provide security on all the endpoints. For example, your mobile endpoints all of a sudden became much more important because people were accessing the same data from their mobile devices. Again, and for example, Microsoft understood that and came out with our iOS and Android endpoint offerings in the last semester, or essentially the last year. So that was a reaction to pandemic, and what we've also seen is a lot of enterprises moving towards that. The other change that you would see there is earlier organizations were saying that organizations data could only be accessed on company owned devices, at least a lot of them were saying. But now that entire organization had to like move away from some of the company owned PCs to their own personal laptops outside or even other devices, then they had to open it up, and therefore again protecting those endpoints became really very critical.
So, Kanishka, I have another question. How organizations, small organizations, less than 15 full-time equivalents, could benefit from something like MS Defender?
uh, okay, I think that's a very good question. uh, I think organization size is one lever, but probably the more important thing is like the moment a lot of your things are moving to the digital world, that actually essentially makes it important for an organization to have the right security apparatus. Now, uh, there were two views around security. At one point of time, an organization was what they were trying to do was they were saying, okay, I want, let's say, an endpoint security solution. Therefore, I would have an AV or an AV equivalent from a vendor. And then they were saying, I have email and I need email security solution, and I'll go to an email security solution vendor. And similarly around network and every piece. So that was one way of doing things. It's just that organizations understood that like this would require a large number of people to take care of this, and that is why for organizations that are 15 members or essentially smaller organizations, it makes even more sense to ensure that you are working off a single vendor, so that you don't have to learn 10 different things. And in more importantly, all these signals are also correlated so that you can manage things easily and see everything in a single pane of glass, which has also been like our approach at Microsoft towards security.
Kanishka, can I request you to please stop the screen sharing?
Sure.
And next, I would club these two questions. Either these are two very interesting questions. So one of them is, can a person get a job in the cybersecurity domain, especially with respect to endpoint security, without a formal degree? And then another is from a professor, that what are the basic skills required for a new entrant? So are there any skills that people can acquire and then get a job in this domain, even though they do not have a with or without a formal degree? How would you like to answer that?
Okay, so there are two parts to it. I think this is probably something which where we need to maybe have even like a deeper, a whole session dedicated to it, because here I just provided a glimpse because I thought that since we are rolling off like this series, it might be useful and interesting for folks to just get some understanding of it. But we can get like a little more specific there as well. But generically, what I want to say, and that's why I picked important examples, people who are actually at like very senior levels. And a great example there was Raghav, who's leading our like cybersecurity research team here, and he just has a diploma. So it is less about like which degree you have. It's more about what interests you have, because you have seen people there who have no computer science background. They've just developed some of these things right now. Like you can have those skills developed even on like through online resources and all, and that's something that we can share later on in a later session, that what are like different interesting, for example, online courses or different areas where you can develop your expertise. But basically, you could be interested in coding and great at coding, and you can become a coder in this space. You can become a data scientist in this space. You can become a researcher in this space by primarily having interest and passion in this area. And then I would say even at Microsoft, when we look at recruiting in different teams, and most of my career I've spent on the productivity side of things, working on apps like PowerPoint or OneNote or Visio or Word. Like from that to security research side or security side, I would believe that it is here and in this security world where degrees are less important. What you know about the space, what you've developed on your own, have you participated in like certain hackathons and done something interesting there, plays a much bigger role here. And again, I know that the answer here can get very specific, and probably for that we will have a totally separate dedicated session there.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Kanishka. And so there is another very specific question, that how does endpoint security safeguard the organization's data, right? And how does it mitigate APTs that are recently seen? So
okay, yeah. So essentially, how does endpoint security safeguard the data? So look, there are two important ways by there are two key ways by which a data can go out of the systems. First one is just the fact that like someone gets the credentials and therefore has access to the machine. And a standard way of doing that is like having a phishing attack. So that's one thing that that the endpoint protection suite will try to do, which is ensure that the phishing attack does not happen. And how an endpoint protect will do that is it will try to look into where this link is going or what this link is pointing to, and whether that site is safe or not. And interestingly, attackers have also evolved over time. They could be like when the link is sent to you, at that point of time, it may not be activated and it may not be a phishing link, but later it can morph into one. And so have the Defender product evolved. It does check when the link comes to you. It also would check when you've tried to open the link, whether the site is still safe or not. So that's one way. The other way is to ensure that like the malicious apps don't get into the system. And if there is something that is getting dropped onto the device, it's a malicious app or a malicious file, that's something that gets flagged, can get quarantined. The right remediation measures can be taken, some automatically, some not there. And one other aspect that I did talk about was some of the times these attacks could seep in. It could be because of wrong configuration, it could be because of any such thing. In that case, these attacks will leave traces. That those traces are like found through the right signals, which we will send to the organizations. And those signals are something that can automatically come up as incidents or alerts, or they could also come in as through essentially mining their data through advanced threat hunting, saying that I'm looking for this particular type of behavior, and that can tell us whether a particular attack is happening, what has happened on the organization or not.
Kanishka, would you like to add upon how the patch management system works in addition to your answer?
Okay, yeah. So in fact, it's like patch management, or in fact, looking at the entire space as vulnerability, which could be like at like for your OS, even figuring out what on your apps. So what an endpoint product, for example, like Defender would try to do is constantly figure out what are the different vulnerabilities, what are the patches that are missing. And in an organizational setup, it will make sure that your security admin, your security center knows that these devices are the ones on which there are known security patches that are missing. You could also tell the same things to the IT, which is essentially normally in most big organizations is a slightly different arm, which then pushes the right patches to the devices. Or they also have then other levers saying that, okay, if this patch is not available for these devices, I can take different actions. And different actions can mean a big thing like a hammer saying that you will not be able to access any corporate content till the right patch is installed, to the saying that you will have to use VPN, or you will not be able to access just limited set of content.
Okay, so we have another question about data exfiltration. So data exfiltration from the compromised PCs that have been under attack of a transparent type, a tribe, from state actor in the cyber attack space. So I think I don't quite get the question, but
yeah, so I'll just mention a point about this space. So like since this talks about the like more of the nation state thing, so that's something that we've seen like increasing quite a bit. Data exfiltration there is like a huge threat, because even in the latest SolarWinds or SolarGate attacks, we've seen that like that's something that's hit big organizations, and even like Department of Defense and all like deeply. And in some of these cases, even the exact extent of the attack and compromise is something that's still getting evaluated. So that's definitely a big threat. Naturally, there wasn't a like solid question behind it, but I think this is definitely a very interesting and evolving space, and something where again this cat and mouse game is actually going on at a very, very fast pace.
so on similar grounds, we have another question that whitelisting of executor signatures, right? Can they be used to create a alert in endpoint security, or how does that work?
Okay, yeah. So whitelisting of an exe corresponding signature or certificates. So some of those things can what it can do is send some signals to the defender, and then we can actually tie it back to like specific through threat hunting, we can actually ensure that we are looking at those right signals, and they are then getting flagged appropriately, so that that can actually be taken care of by your security admin.
So I think we can take a couple more questions before we. So we've already answered how endpoint security has sort of evolved in the last couple of years, and although we have one follow-up question from the students again that okay, they can take the certifications and you know they can have some sort of a proof of their skills, but would a degree bar them from getting a job?
Oh, definitely not. A degree does not bar you from getting a job. It's just that degree definitely helps you and helps you build that knowledge. In fact, if the second example that I took, where we talked about Funny, who is who although had an electrical engineering degree, but then he was interested in data science, so he did a bunch of online courses. So this was not a formal degree in data science, but a bunch of online courses, and that got him started into this space. uh, the other important thing to note in this area is, uh, we've talked about it a couple of times. uh, there is a talent shortage here, which and that's primarily because the field is very evolving and it's growing at a very, very fast pace. And what that means is that there is a lot of scope for coming into this field and learning, and organizations are also uh, okay taking people who are passionate in the space, who know little but who are very interested in learning new things. So having that passion for learning is most important, especially in things that are changing so fast.
Okay. Yes, of course, having a degree would, having a degree would help you develop some overall more holistic skill set. But it definitely not having a degree wouldn't be, uh, you know, wouldn't stop you from getting a job as a cybersecurity expert.
Very well
So,
summarized. In fact, that is the
so
primary point here.
yeah, one question is how enterprise endpoint protection is different from a consumer endpoint protection.
Okay. Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So one way to look at it is, there are certain things that the protection piece will try to do on its own. So firstly, for example, Defender for Endpoint is a good example. We have the offering available uh, for our enterprise users. You could also have, for example, Defender for Windows set up on your Windows machine as a personal user as well. So like some of these protections are really very same. If we, for example, figure out that a malicious app is getting onto your device, it does not matter whether it's a corporate device or a personal device, we would still have the same kind of protection. However, when there's an organization, we view things slightly differently. There are different kinds of controls that an organization might want to have. uh, Let me give you some examples there. For example, they may say, if I find a malicious application on your device, then what would happen? In If it's a personal device, then yes, standard quarantine and other things will happen. But then it's up to you to uh, take an action or not take an action. It's something that it's totally in your control. Whereas in organizations' case, their rules, their policies will determine things. Secondly, organizations also interested in not just what's happened on this device, but what has happened. Has similar thing happened on other devices? So it's not just about an alert that they are seeing. They are also trying to figure out that, is there a big incident that where all these alerts are correlated? And in certain cases, it may not just be the same malicious app. It could be linked with a phishing attack that has led to a malicious app being downloaded. So different security incidents being tied together. Uh, and through an organization, they also have the critical mass to have the right people to go and investigate and do much more. So on the enterprise side, you will have much more levers with the organizations to go deeper, to analyze, to correlate things, to have the right policy set. Whereas on the personal side, the choice is then essentially left to the end user. And in certain cases, they may also choose to, let's say, ignore this advice. A good example there could be, let's say, the WhatsApp has a known vulnerability, but an end user says that right now I do not want to upgrade to the latest version of WhatsApp, which has the appropriate patches. I just want to continue using my own thing, and that then naturally it's end user's prerogative that they still want to use this.
That's very aptly explained, Kanishka. So, from the trend I'm seeing, there's a lot of questions students have about different career choices and different ways to get into. So, maybe going forward, we can have a dedicated career counseling sort of a session in terms of cybersecurity. So, but for now, if you could help our attendee out that they have done an MTech and they're doing an MTech in cryptology and security. So, what different domains do you think they can get into within the broad cybersecurity umbrella?
Uh, so for this one, I will actually have to defer to the right people so that they can actually give the right suggestions that what are the different options open, and not just like some select ones that I might have little visibility into. So this one, probably it's best if we park it to our like other session that you are talking about, where we'll just go deeper into this, and probably we'll have people from different areas just talk about this, say that have we hired people with this, are we looking for something extra over and above this or not. So I think then it'll be a little more comprehensive.
Yeah, that essentially is our idea, to create that sort of sensitivity among the students. So as you aptly said, that we do have a talent crunch within our domain. So to get more bright people involved with us. And I think there's another question about something similar. So we'll, Shashi Raj, so please stay tuned. We'll have another webinar focused on career. So your question would be answered there. So I think that's pretty much about it. And I think we can wind
Yeah.
up comfortably now.
Yeah, we are over time, but like
Yeah.
really thrilled to like have these questions coming and see that like the students and even like the professors are very interested in this. Also, really thankful to the opportunity that you and your organization has provided us, Vikas, and to reach out to folks in this field. To students, to help them guide, to also learn from them that what they are seeing, what are their interests, what is it that that they're looking for, is also very, very interesting for us as well.
Thank you so much, Kanishka, for taking the time out and being with us here and interacting with our students. So with this, we come to an end to today's session, and we'd be coming up with several more sessions, and we'd analyze the response we had today and the sort of questions got asked, and then curate more app sessions going forward. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Kanishka, once again, and thank you, audience, for joining us, and have a very good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.